The Love, Life, and Lose Weight podcast will teach you the art and science of changing your habits around food. If you know what to do, but can't figure out why you're just not doing it, this is the right podcast for you. I'm your host, Advanced Certified Weight and Life Coach, Heather Beardsley. I've helped hundreds of women just like you figure out how to think and eat like a normal eater, lose weight, and love life on the journey to goal weight and beyond. Hi, everybody. Welcome to episode 62. This is a bit of a milestone in the Love, Life, and Lose Weight podcast. So, 2 years ago, about this time is when episode 1 came out. I took a big break in between. Probably, I took off from like last year at this time until May, I think. So, 62 episodes, basically covering the nuts and bolts of the how to do weight loss and how to think about sustainable weight loss. And so I was thinking a lot about the next year of the podcast and how I wanted to talk about what's important without going over the same things over and over again. What I'd like to do from here for the next year of content is going to be talking about how to extend out sustainable weight loss and the lifestyle that you create for yourself when you practice non restrictive food choices and you tune in internally to your interoception, your internal hunger and enough cues to tell you when and how much to eat. This is going to give you a lot more feelings of control and self agency in your life. And what happens is you start to bump into other areas of your life where you want to start to practice the same idea, where you are internally motivated, listening internally to yourself, your own voice, your own values, and how you want to operate in the world. I like to say, sustainable weight loss and staying at your happy weight, learning how to do that for the rest of your life is like contagious to other areas of your life. Because how we were doing weight loss before when it was restrictive is oftentimes how we do relationships, finances, social, friend groups. A lot of the same motifs of themes of restriction, external validation, people pleasing, boundaries, all of these things can kind of get knotted up in other areas of our life. And so to make weight loss truly sustainable, at some point in your journey, you're going to want to take a really good look at some of these other areas because let me give you one example. Let's say your best girlfriend. Let's say you do a lot of people pleasing with her. You kind of let her make the plans, you let her decide when and what time because you've kind of just always done that. And you could get to the point where you get frustrated with this. Why does the frustration happen? Because you're not operating in alignment with what is within you. Maybe you have an opinion about where you'd like to go eat. And you need to figure out how to evolve in your relationship with your girlfriend so that she understands, hey, I, maybe used to let you take the ball all the time, but now I'd like to sometimes make some decisions about what we'd like to do. So let's do it a little differently. And those conversations and those approaches can feel as hard to do as our first steps in non restrictive weight loss, like really planning for the things that you used to think you couldn't eat and still lose weight or stay at your desired weight. So that's where we're going over the next year. There's a lot of great topics coming up. I'm really excited to talk to you about them. I will be weaving in sustainable weight loss as I teach it to each of these concepts. But I do want to offer you something else. I do understand that going through some of my podcast content, my book, it's giving you a lot of ideas and concepts, but it's not really giving you a system either. And not every one of you can coach with me. I'm pretty much full in my one-on-one coaching. And so I think a lot about somebody like maybe yourself who really needs a system to kind of practically apply these ideas, how to know what to do, how to get the practice in. So I'm going to be probably creating a course, but more than just a course, like a system of worksheets to help guide you, go to foundations for you to kind of look at and listen to. I don't really know the format that it's going to be, but I'm devising it, and my goal is that anybody who wants to learn non-restrictive weight loss and how to apply it in their life will be able to learn the concepts without necessarily needing to work with me one-on-one. It's not going to be a membership or anything like that. I'm not doing that. But I will create potentially courses, maybe some webinars, maybe some digital products, and maybe package all those things together for you in a way where you could get the information that you need so that you can practice and move toward freedom in your food lifestyle and living at your goal weight. That's my purpose. That's what I'm here to give you. And all of these things will hopefully be coming out in the new year, hopefully before spring. We'll see how it goes. Okay. So stay tuned. For today, we are talking about how to let go of your shoulds and build a life that's yours. So, again, this is the same idea that I mentioned before, which is many of my clients talk about all the shoulds they hear in their self talk. Well, I shouldn't have that for dinner. Shouldn't have ice cream for dinner, even though I've been craving ice cream, right? Or I've already had ice cream already twice this week. I should go work out. I should be able to run faster than I am running. I should look more youthful than I feel like I look at my age. All of these shoulds. Universally, I think most people don't find shoulding on themselves when they hear their self talk to feel particularly motivating. So, this concept of shoulding on yourself, what it does is it creates conflict between what you're doing and what you think you should do. That's different. You want to always notice the shoulds so that you have an opportunity to change the direction of your automatic habits, right? You can't stop overeating, for example, if you're trying to lose weight, if you don't notice and think, oh, I shouldn't overeat. Like shoulding on yourself is there to help us. We just want to find a way to think about the shoulding that happens and direct it in a way that feels helpful in your process, no matter what you're trying to do. So, the goal for this episode is to understand why you default to shoulding, where it came from, and then how to begin to start to make choices from an internal place, the should that you choose from your voice and your values. So, shoulding on yourself when we lose weight, we oftentimes hear those conditioned ideas of what the diet industry says, how we should eat, what we should eat, and how much we should eat. Therefore, virtuous food. And that's why we have calories. And that's why there's macros and all that stuff. Those are all external conditioned ideas of the right way to lose weight. Now, I assume most of you that doesn't work for you. That's why you're listening to this podcast. I mean, to be honest with you, there are some people who just don't mind counting calories or counting macros or planning all that virtuous food, and they love it. And for them, that's not a problem. This isn't a universal problem. But for those of you who are telling yourself you should do things, but yet you aren't because you truly don't want to, this is the episode for you, because we want to get you out of that place of never being able to take a win, right? When you tell yourself you have to act by someone else's standards, and those standards exterior to you don't really line up with how you really feel, then we've got to find a way to find different standards. And so you're going to do this by internally deciding what those standards are. So let's understand what should mentality is and where it comes from. So, the way that I coach and was trained to coach is based on cognitive behavioral conditioning. This is a very basic concept of learning, how we learn, right? We have thoughts about what's happening in our world, and then those thoughts create feelings within us, and our actions usually come from how we feel because of how we're thinking. So it's a thought, feel, and do model of human behavior. So, should thinking fits into this explanation where things happen in the world and we have thoughts about that include this idea of should, right? Right actions versus wrong actions. So, like psychologists call this cognitive distortions, where we take on society's idea or your parents' idea or what you read in magazines or what you got through your growing up feedback, societal, family, and cultural expectations. And you hear feedback like this. And as a youngster, eventually that feedback gets internalized. Your brain starts just automatically thinking in terms of that conditioning and that learning that you got from those outside sources. This is how we are supposed to learn as young people. So at some point, though, we know that, okay, let's say you're at the park with your little one and they run out into the street. Well, you're going to give your child social parental conditioning that says never run out into the street. That's dangerous. Right. And hopefully your little one will internalize that so that they stop themselves before they run out into the street. So we do this kind of conditioning to help keep everybody alive and not in trouble, right? Not hurting other people. And so that nothing's gone wrong here. But at some point in our growth and into adulthood, it will be helpful for you to really understand that the thoughts that your brain offers are often just mirrors of some of this conditioning that you got from long, long ago. It's just replaying the tape for you. And it's fine to replay the tape. Where we want to pay attention is when we're thinking in terms of shoulds, where it feels almost impossible for us to comply, or we have a resistance to the shoulding thinking that we're happening in our brains. So, studies show in cognitive behavioral conditioning that habitually thinking in a negative way, like shoulding, creates mental stress and lowers self esteem. Because what we're doing is we're having a negative self regard over our own actions. And again, this is situational, right? Like when I was drinking too much, I was thinking I was drinking too much. Other people I know, they talk about drinking that much and they love how much they drink. So this is not like fact based and it's not applicable to everybody. This is an individual thing where you'll notice when you're acting in ways that you don't like. So when I was noticing I was drinking too much, I wasn't looking at studies from doctors that said, how drinking damages your liver and how much. That was not happening at all. This was something that was a value inside of me where I was noticing how I was acting around alcohol. And I personally, from internal me, didn't want to be in that kind of a relationship with alcohol. I just didn't like wanting more alcohol than what I thought was the right amount for me. So I was shitting on myself. But notice that came from internal me, not external me. I mean, there was some of that too. Nothing is really like all or nothing one way or the other. When you notice the shoulds and you notice that you're not lining up with what you should do, that's either a massive opportunity for growth for you. And for me, it was really pushing the envelope after trying to moderate my drinking for many years and just saying, I'm just going to try quitting now because I couldn't rectify the shoulds in my own head from internal me and my current habit of drinking. For most of us, the shoulding, you'll notice, comes from external ideas about what you should be doing. And that's the part that we really want to try to recondition or relearn from an internal place rather than an external place. Okay. When we compare ourselves to others, we learn to adopt shoulds based on external pressures. That's what I'm talking about here. Most of my clients, and probably for most of you, this has to do with what we should weigh is a great idea, a great example to use. What you should weigh versus what you do weigh. Most of us have that based on external conditioning. What the doctor's chart in the doctor's office says, what your friends weigh, some idea of maybe what you weighed at a younger age at a different time. Those are external ideas of how much you should weigh. And all I'm saying is if that idea about between what you weigh right now and what you're thinking habitually you should weigh doesn't feel good based on some idea outside of yourself, this is a perfect opportunity for you to practice building a life that's your own based on the weight that you decide you want to weigh. Okay. So, just a little bit more about why we think in shoulds. It basically stems from this desire for approval and safety. Think about that little kid who runs into the road at the park, right? That child knows when mom gets upset that he ran into the road. We want to win mom's approval, and we also want to stay safe. So when she gives us feedback that running into the road is dangerous and never do that again, right? We want to comply with her when we're young, right? We want to live up to her expectations of us and we want to stay safe. Okay. So that's where it comes from, way, way back. So this idea of like adopting what the outside world says we should do is associated in our brains and probably always will be associated in our brains with safety and approval and being okay. So, another concept of social comparison theory comes in here when we're talking about shoulds as well. This is when we compare ourselves to others, and shoulds can come out of that. So, when we look at our friends and how much they weigh, this is where the shoulds can come in. What they wear, the clothing they wear, where they go to school, how early do they get married or don't they get married? Do they have kids? Don't they have kids? And this is our idea of like understanding if we're safe and how we're doing socially. Human beings are social beings, and we learn by observing and looking at what other people are doing. It's in our DNA to keep us safe. When you think about your primal ancestor, when she went down to the river to get water, and she noticed her friend ate the red berries and then died, right? We're going to compare and we're going to say, I'm never going to eat a red berry like that because that could kill me. And shoulding based on that, you can see how helpful it is in a primal perspective to keep you safe. So when we hear shoulds based on our social comparison of others, just know that this is a vestige of many eons of evolution still kind of playing out as a way to keep you safe. But we know that like if you don't have those same jeans as your friend who spent 4 times what you spend on jeans, we know that this idea, well, I should probably have more fashionable jeans than as my friend does. This is just social conditioning that's not really helpful for you. I mean, if you like the jeans, it's great. Again, that's internal. But if you don't want to spend that kind of money on the jeans, then noticing that should and reprogramming that is going to really help you get rid of some of this ancillary shoulding that you're doing on yourself that is just not helpful for you. So, this is social conditioning theory, and the shoulds that happen when we compare ourselves to others is why we feel pressured to live up to certain standards that aren't necessarily aligned with what we want. Your next step is to understand, what do you want? If we discard this idea of what we should weigh based on, I don't know, what we weighed outside of high school. Well, a lot of times we come up with a blank. We just don't know. Well, I don't know. Like what is the right weight for me? And this is where you've got to reframe your thinking into, instead of some external idea of the marker of that, what I often offer my clients is to think about the lifestyle that creates the weight that feels good. So for me, as an example, I don't like overeating. I've worked on my weight long enough and got rid of a lot of shoulding thinking for many years now. And I like being able to eat whatever I want. But I also like this idea of being in a moderate relationship with foods that I know can spark cravings or over desire. These are like baked goods for me, coconut cake, things like that. So, a moderate relationship with permission based eating. Yeah, that's what I want. And I also don't like overeating too often. So, once, maybe twice a week is the max for me. And, as I've continued to listen to my hunger and enough cues, I wait for my hunger before I eat. And I stop eating when I'm at 70, 75% full. These are all the basics in how I teach weight loss. My weight has, with the help of weight loss medication, has recalibrated down, and I'm sitting just a few pounds from what I think is really my happy maintenance range. And I care less about the number than I care about the lifestyle that's created it. So, for example, here's how I think about being on weight loss medication. I love how it takes that same over desire that I had with my drinking, that I also noticed that sometimes I have with my eating most of the time in my past. And it takes it down to a level at which feels really great for me. I feel more like a normal eater, like I have normal amounts of hunger and I reach satiety. Whereas before, I didn't always reach satiety. I couldn't tell when I had enough. And that's what was creating a lot of my extra weight on me. And I know that this came from, if you read my book, this is in there, too much restrictive dieting for too long. It sort of changed my satiety signaling in my body. It changed my hunger hormones. My body thought I was in a famine. And so, in this way, weight loss medication fits in with the lifestyle that I want to have forever with my weight. Now, will there be some time in the future where maybe I could get off of the weight loss medication and still feel those positive effects? Maybe. I'm going to be experimenting with that as the years go by. But you see, when I frame my weight, my happy weight, in terms of the lifestyle that I want to have in my own experience of my life, not feeling hungry all the time, reaching satiety like I'm a normal eater. Once again, I recognize it from my past before I dieted. It feels like the old me, not too many overeats and always leaving about more than 20% in my stomach when I stop eating. This is what has created the number that's right for me. So for most of my clients, they come into weight loss thinking, I have to reach a certain number and then I'll love my life. And what I'm saying is to get rid of the shoulds, you're going to have to think about what kind of life do I want to live that creates a corresponding weight that is aligned with that lifestyle. So when you do that and you get busy really falling in love with the life, then there is very little should thinking. It decreases dramatically. So, why should you do this work of reframing shoulds and taking a look at external locus of what you should be doing versus internal? Well, emotionally, living with a lot of shoulds and noticing that in your life creates a lot of negative emotions, guilt, shame, frustration when you fail to meet your shoulds. This leads to a lifestyle of like burnout and emotional fatigue. So these emotions can become like ingrained into your nervous system as the norm because you've repeated it so much. Look at me. I always let myself down. I hear this a lot from my clients. I'm always letting myself down, or I always do great. And then it all goes to hell in a handbasket. I mean, is that the kind of internal life that you want with you? I mean, our internal world is your experience of your life. I mean, forget external things like your house. And yes, you have kids and maybe you have a partner and, maybe you've accomplished some professional things. These are all external measures that, of course, are amazing to work on in your life. But there's also this internal world that you have as you go through all of the different circumstances in the life that you've created. And if there's a shit ton of shoulding happening in your head and you feel tons of guilt, shame, and frustration on a daily basis, you really need to look at that and just know like it does not need to be this way. Again, the example with my drinking, this was a constant theme for me. And I got so fed up with constantly feeling frustrated with my actions, shamed from not being able to allow urges and not drink, and guilt that I didn't have more control, that I really did a massive change to my life. And taking away this for me, just deciding I was not going to be a drinker makes all the difference. I have none of the shoulding anymore. Not even in the opposite, like, oh, maybe I should drink. Like, that's not even a thing for me because I've really fallen in love with the lifestyle. And I know that it comes from internal me feeling like I'm just a better Heather because I don't drink. That's personal. That's values driven. That's a me thing. Okay. Somebody who quits drinking because of external ideas about it being better, well, that may or may not last. So again, it has to do with your value system. So let's go on to how to rewire your thinking. So the first thing that you want to do if you want to change some of these shoulds is to identify them. You're going to be listening for your thinking. And even if you miss your thinking, you will know that you're shitting on yourself because you will be feeling that guilt, that frustration with yourself that you're not like meeting your own expectations of what your brain is saying you should be doing. So you will either notice those feelings, frustration, guilt, feeling let down by yourself, or you'll notice the actual should thoughts in your head. I want you to keep a journal for a week and write down whenever you think or say to yourself, you should be doing things. And write them all down so that you can become aware of them. We do the same thing when we do time management. When somebody says, oh my gosh, I don't have enough time, or my time's a mess, I never have enough time. We say we tell them to do a time study. It's I. I tell them to do a time study. This is the same thing. You're going to do a should study for 1 week. Okay. So just jot it down, keep a place for it. Then step 2 is to reflect on where the shoulds came from. Are these shoulds that are coming from external ideas of right actions, family, society, media, the diet industry? Okay. Where is it coming from? And here's a tip for you. For each should thought that you identify, ask yourself, whose voice is this that I'm hearing? Maybe it's your mother's. Maybe it's your brother's. Maybe it's your sister's. It's always fascinating for me to like for when I ask this in my with my clients in my sessions, and I say, "Well, where did you learn that from?" They always tell me right away. Even if it was 40 years ago. So, it's always interesting to see the echoes of old conditioning still coming through as clearly as it was ingrained 40 years ago or decades ago, whatever it might be. The next question is it you is that you or is it coming from somewhere else, somewhere external to you? And then here's the third part. What are the consequences if you keep thinking this thought? What kind of life is created if you don't change the should? Maybe for some of you, you don't mind the should. The should is like a harsh talking to, and it feels slightly motivating and it gets you to do what you need to do. Well, that's fine. Keep doing it. I love it. Shoulds aren't always negative. Again, remember the berries? And I needed to also hear the shoulding in my own drinking. But for external shoulds that are no longer aligned with the lifestyle that you want to live, we want to identify those. Okay. So, step 1 is to identify your shoulds. Step 2 is to recognize the source of your shoulds. And step 3 is to reframe the shoulds with self directed language. What this means is once you identify the should, work on reframing the thoughts using empowering self directed language. Empowering means the source of truth comes from within you and what you believe is right for you. And self directed meaning you are the one in charge. You're driving the car of your life. So, for example, you would replace I should exercise more with maybe something like I choose to exercise when it makes me feel strong and energized, and I have time for it. So, when you replace should, you're often going to use I choose, I decide, I'm curious about, I'm interested in, words like that. So this is intrinsic motivation versus the voice of extrinsic conditioning. Okay. So building a life that's yours. This means choosing those extra internal decisions about what's right for you over ideas of what you learned in your lifetime that you've just sort of taken on habitually. So, how do you know, like with the goal weight, what you truly want? You're going to reflect on your core values. I've done this enough that I know what are my core values. Honesty, truth and honesty, integrity, freedom, and maybe like a sense of grace, meaning that's not religious for me. What grace means is sort of like compassion and like a sense of humanity and caring to my life, generosity, if you will. So, what I'd like you to do if you're having, let's say you've identified some shoulds over the course of the next week, you can recognize where they came from outside of yourself. Now, what you want to do when you want to replace that external shoulding with something that you want to tie it to your values. So, what I'd like you to do is to create a list of activities, behaviors, or goals for yourself that are aligned with your values and bring you a sense of like joy or completion or some kind of feel good emotion. So, for example, that you could take yourself from I should weigh X number of pounds to I'm really curious what lifestyle around food will allow me to be at my natural weight, where I have freedom in my movement and freedom to wear whatever I want. So notice how your values of freedom in this case and your core desired emotion of freedom is aligned with a weight that makes you feel a certain way in your body. So that's defined in such a way that you'll know when you get there. So you might know, okay, that's at least 10 pounds less than what I am now. Maybe it's 20, whatever it is. You just work toward that. You don't need to have a certain specific number because that's really asking too much of the number, right? That's an externally derived idea of what you should weigh. And instead, I want you to create a very vivid and compelling idea of the lifestyle around food and your behaviors and your thoughts around food that help you live at a certain weight that allows you to do certain things, maybe not do certain things, and feel a certain way at your weight. So this is a much more nuanced and comprehensive idea of a lifestyle that creates the weight as a natural result of living that lifestyle. So this is rather than you kind of telling yourself how you have to act based on some restrictive diet idea of what gets you there. And instead, you're now like inspiring yourself to step into this idea of living with food, being in relationship with food, having habits around food, movement, maybe if that's part of it too for you, that feels good and feels empowering and feels exciting, maybe, or at least not resistant. Okay. Not everybody has to feel amazing about their food lifestyle, but it certainly shouldn't feel something dreadful. Okay. So here's your summary and your homework, more homework. So we often think we in shoulds because of how your conditioning took place from your family and society growing up. Identifying where these should thinking comes from gives you an opportunity to reframe them if you want to based on your internal values rather than external ideas about what's right for you. Building a life based on what you truly want requires shifting from external approval and should thinking to internal direction and self fulfillment and self agency in your life. Your homework assignment is to, like I said before, journal on whenever you notice a should thought, mark it down, and then you're going to reflect on the source. Where did this should come from? And is it internal to me or external to me? If it's internal or external, does it align with your values? Another point of homework is to reframe one significant should into a self directed choice. So you're going to take the old should thought and you're going to rewrite it and edit it into a self directed thought using probably like want to, curious, I choose to, I'm looking forward to, I'm curious about. And then take one small action based on this new thought. So be kind to yourself as you notice your should thinking and you start to shift it. Changing ingrained thought patterns like shoulding on yourself takes a lot of time and a lot of practice, but it's essential to building a life that is yours instead of what society tells you you should have, be, do. Visit me on Instagram at Thrive in Midlife and let me know what you think about the episode. If you are interested in working with me or getting my free planner or learning more about the materials and systems that I'm creating for sustainable weight loss, just go to the episode 62 reel on Instagram. It will come out the day this podcast comes out. And just comment with subscribe, and I will DM you the link to join my email list. Or you can just comment on some of your homework for accountability. Tell me what you learned, or maybe some of your ahas or takeaways. I wanted to mention some additional resources that may help you with some of this work. I always recommend The Gifts of Imperfection by Brené Brown, which talks about letting go of societal expectations. A lot of the shoulding comes from that. And you can try to practice with some resources like meditations or affirmations to give yourself feedback that it's safe for you to listen to your own voice. You don't have to be perfect or comply with society's ideas about what's right for you. I think life becomes so much more meaningful when we do that ourselves as an inside job. And I'm here to support you on your journey. I hope it's been helpful. I'll see you over on Instagram. Stay focused, and so long. Hey, if this episode resonated for you, then let's connect. Visit hbeardsley.com/subscribe. That's hbeardsley.com/subscribe and get on the list. You'll get a free gift, periodic coaching, plus advance notice of in-person events and workshops.